and it's very nice view.
The parking lot has a nice.
Yes, parking lot has nice view too. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to talk about is shoreline resilience, okay? Cambridge Spy has a long article by Larry White.
Actually, it's
We're
by
not saying
Ryan
by-
Anthony.
By Ryan
Anthony.
Anthony, who interviewed Larry. And it's a lengthy article on shoreline resilience, okay? And you should read it because I've had 2 discussions in the past week with groups of people who told me this is not happening. This is not gonna happen. They got 1.6 million to do the study. FEMA set aside $16 million to do it. It's gonna happen. So if you near the water or looking at the water, it's 7-foot berm from Marsh Park all the way around the creek to the high ground around the creek, past the old place. Okay, and how it's gonna work with the streets and all that kind of stuff, I think is gonna send out the article to all the members, so you don't have to look for it, we just send it to you. Okay, so that's the 2 things that I wanted to bring to your attention, keep you up to date. What do you think?
And I just want to offer Bill and April seat.
Okay.
Oh, we're good.
You sure? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank
So with that, any questions? Detailed responses on anything that you may come. So with that, I introduce Brian Rose, Commissioner for the 5th Ward.
Yeah, so thank you guys for having me. Thanks again, Chuck. And I did have one question. I'm not sure if it's 7 foot high or if it's 7 feet above
Medium high tide.
the high tide. So like right now, flood stage is like 4.5 or something. I think the one that we had just recently was 5.2 maybe. Isabel was 6.2. Was it? That's the record. So 7 is, I guess the idea is to get it 7 feet above whatever mean high tide is. So it won't be like a 7 foot high berm per se. It'll just be at the 7 foot level, right?
Brian, yeah, if you look at that cross section that's in that article that I read today, it's about roughly 3.5 feet, 3.5, maybe 3 to 4 feet above ground level
Yeah.
in many areas.
Yeah,
But it's 7 feet above mean sea level.
right. Yeah. So that's something that's helpful. Just, it's not quite the monstrosity. But I was telling Chuck too, I said, one of the topics tonight was the trails project. And I remember in 2008 walking that property as a citizen advocate for Cannery Park and the packing house and all of that. And there was an encampment back there. The rail is still there. The packing house was an antique place, and if now that was 15 years ago. So stuff takes a long time. It's still not going. But anyway, thanks for having me. I feel like I'm blessed in some ways to have represented Ward 1 and now Ward 5. It's given me a good cross-section of the community. I tried to get Ward 5 to come out tonight. I got to talk to my neighbors. But one of the things I was telling Judd when I came here is that we got chairs. It'd be interesting to see if these are the people that always sat in the back. Line up that back row. Or not.
Thank you, Doug.
while we're putting chairs up, how is this going to affect the new public dock at the Philadelphia?
Oh, a new public dock at Philadelphia. Is there a new public dock at Philadelphia? Oh, and I know about that, and people probably know that happens to be the guy that owns mine. And anyone that knows me well knows that I have a storied past with the company, but I made it very clear that I had heard some rumblings about that, and that, I mean, I assume that's MDE's purview, but it's certainly not any purview of the city other than maybe the city engineer. It's nothing that, as an elected official, I think I thought it had been worked out and was going to be moved, but if it hasn't, then that would be news to me. But I've done my best to just let him know that I had heard the community wasn't happy and that I assumed it was being taken care of. So, as you know,
There are citizen action alternatives, you realize.
oh, well, I mean, that's, again, and I have absolutely no interest in that dock or whatever, and
I
I'm
didn't mean to
sorry.
put you in a rough
Oh,
place.
it's that it gets reconciled, because I can see what you're talking about, so,
So why are we talking about docks?
yeah.
When they put the berm down, are they gonna take all the docks that are along the river out?
So, full disclosure, I'm not the city engineer, but, I happen to really like our new city engineer. I like George, our other one, and I asked him about it. He said that there's some challenges there, and honestly, particularly the end of Belvedere, which is interesting because Mr. White lives right there as well. So I'm like, you talk about ground zero for some interest, a berm, a dock, what are they going to do? And I'm assuming it's complicated, but I also assume that they've worked it out, but I don't know. I mean, I think this money that we just got is actually to figure out what they're gonna do, design wise, because one of the things that's encouraging to me in Shore Rivers this year is that, I am a staunch advocate for, natural solutions. I think a lot of what we're seeing is the river trying to reclaim what was once its, to use a long verb, but ownership. But it's like I just see where most of the flooding and the water penetration is, and it's areas that we filled, or it's areas that were natural drainage courses. So something that I advocated for very early on was the Mill Street Greenway. If there was anything that could be done instead of putting townhomes there, that we could actually capture some of the upstream water, because just as big of a problem for this berm, from what I understand, is it's keeping water out, but it's also forming a bathtub. And so that's something that the engineers are going to have to be mindful of. And New Orleans had a lot of pumps and levees and things that were supposed to work, and a whole organization that was supposed to make sure that everything was working as supposed. But I think a lot of what caught them, and we can't have happen here, is it also happened in Ellicott City, is they had water coming through that town forever, and they had a major flood event a little while back, and everyone was asking, how does this happen? Oh, we're getting much more rain than we used to, blah, blah. No, actually what had happened was upstream from Ellicott City, we used to be all woodland and forest and areas that actually could capture the groundwater, and it was now impervious surface. So it was accelerating and being channeled, just like on the Mississippi. The Army Corps of Engineers solved a lot of problems, but they caused a lot of problems downstream. So we're smart enough and we have enough historical precedent to know that our just as big of a challenge we have is to keep that water from actually getting downhill as much as possible. So the Mill Street was a real opportunity. The residents really didn't want to see something incompatible with the neighborhood. They made that loud and clear. They didn't think that condos that could sit out on Route 16 were proper for that site. So it was an opportunity. It also happens to, a lot of green space is green for a reason and has been for 100 years because it's terribly wet, incredibly expensive to build on historically. But now we can look at those areas and say, this is actually a natural drainage course for a lot of the West End. So why don't we look at what it used to look like, enhance it, and actually capture some of that water? So that's other than the berm, that's a real positive development. And talking to my friends at Shore Rivers, the federal government is even starting to turn around from just building berms, but also, and Larry White too has mentioned it, looking at strategic acquisition of properties, and looking at things that would actually enhance the natural capture and control of flooding. For example, New Orleans realizes that they should have just let the upper river flood out a lot, and that might actually have prevented a lot of the water filling up their proverbial bathtub, which was their low-lying area in the city.
Brian, you're talking about the berm, and have there been any studies of how those berms may affect channeling water down toward the creek?
No, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about, and I have to hope that, that a berm's just not gonna be built, that it ends up exacerbating issues on Hambrooks and or in the creek area, because the creek area, of course, we live there, so we're concerned, first and foremost, but it's our center of commerce, or at least local commerce in many ways for the city. So we have to think about it, the economic impacts and things like that. So I'm with you. Talking to Joe Brooks, who is part of Clayton's, and they've added 8x8 salt treated wood, just raise the level of their bulkhead, and that has helped them. He said about 5.2 because, I mean, yacht maintenance and Clayton's two of our celebrated maritime commercial entities, which every plan we've ever had says we need to embrace that. That's one of our local, it's our heritage. It's also our comparative advantages. You can do things in Cambridge at those sites that you can't do anywhere else. So we have to protect them. Well, those two places just this past week have been subject to a lot of inundation, and the minute that impacts the local economy, that impacts all of us. So it's a very good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I just know that the berm right now, or that the raised grade, is only supposed to hit the end of 100 High Street where I used to live. And then it's high enough again once you get over to the waterfront development. I mean, that's very high over there, and Ward 5, with the exception of Creek part, is fairly high off the ground. So it's a good question. Why wouldn't we just make it a little further? Talking to our city engineer, George Hyde, who also lives at Cambridge Landing, he said probably our near-term solution is to raise the bulkhead, which is no small feat considering all this condo reserve legislation that's gone through, and we're all scrambling to wonder if we can afford our quarterly dues. So, yes, sir.
We talk about sailings a little bit. Seems there's a lot of not very cooperative between the city council and the folks at Sailwinds. Could you, is there ways, or are you looking to work a little bit more cooperatively, or to get them to work a little bit more cooperation with you?
I absolutely, wholeheartedly am cooperating with the waterfront personally. And I want to actually, and Matt Leonard's here so he can correct any of my factual errors, but there is so much positive happening that I think some of the hardest things are the optics of things. And I mean, everything the community said they wanted about that site is the first priority, which is the river walk, the vast amount of green space, the 3 acres, 3.5 acres of green space right out in front. the expansion of the yacht maintenance property to put a 850-ton lift, which is again a comparative advantage. Why would we not do that and support that? There's absolutely no reason not to. The infusion of money that the CWDI has put into the Maritime Museum to help them do renovations, the $15 million contract to restore the presidential yacht, which visited the fishing pier, the Emerson C. Harrington Bridge, and then just the general care of the property since I think over the last year or two or few years has been wonderful. The one thing though that's sort of up in the air that I can only hope is the thing that my fellow commissioners are concerned or interested about. Oh, a boutique hotel is a possibility, which honestly is what the community, and if you stand on that spot to rotate people through that point and to just stand there, it's something that location doesn't exist anywhere else, and to actually have new people coming in and walking downtown and all of that. All these are such positive things that take a longer than we want, but are being handled wonderfully by CWDI.
It doesn't seem to be very much commercial development in there, though.
So I happen to have been around. I know that I don't look like I'm old enough, but when all of this started, and the interesting thing to me is it's closer than it's ever been, and everyone involved very early on, from what I understand, I was just getting out of college. They knew there was a few things that needed to happen to make it an interesting site. One was it wasn't big enough when the hospital was there. I think it's unfortunate that most of our medical operations have moved out of here. My wife is pregnant again, and we've had a struggle with care. We don't know whether to go in Salisbury or Easton or Annapolis or things like that. But just having it be a contiguous piece took the hospital going away, for good or for bad. I'm not making a judgment call. I love the fact that we're memorializing that. That's another thing I failed to mention, those elm trees that are staying, and actually honoring the legacy of that hospital, which was built by the citizens of this community and funded for so long locally. It was not a government hospital. So 30 years might seem like a long time, but I've been out of college. I've been back for 17. And like I said, Cannery Park, I remember walking in, there was a homeless encampment there, and now we've got the packing house, but that just happened in the last couple of years. So all these parks have taken a long time, but now they're actually to the point where something can actually happen. And the city has decided to act like, a few members, and I'm the dissenter of the group, to just question their own appointees on the board and things like that. And I'm not really sure. I still don't understand why that is. But honestly, I'm fully in favor of what's going on, and I'm advocating for them to continue to go forward. And really, so my point to bring this up is there's 4 parcels that are on, really all that's up for discussion if you look at the community's blueprint for the site. The green space is settled, so we should be doing everything in our power to support that. The waterfront walkway is settled, we should be doing everything in our power to support that. It was loud and clear forever that that's what the community wanted. And again, the maritime commercial element. So there's 4 parcels, and those are enclosed in fencing that are up for, development. And so if anything, that's the only thing that should be under discussion, what's going to happen there. And I think every meeting and every update I've gotten from CWDI is all ideas are welcome. They want investment, but Cambridge is challenging for a number of reasons, and I've learned that more and more since I've been on the council. That you got to find the right mix of investment, the right people to undertake the stuff. But I firmly believe in the framework of the city-county state partnership. We should not meddle in that at all. It was done for a very good reason, and I honestly think that it's a lot further along than maybe it appears. And the biggest challenge is communicating that to the community and actually saying, hey, here's the good news, without divulging plans that maybe if somebody's looking to purchase property, you don't wanna run up the price on them and make it unfeasible or something, I don't know.
Well, Brian, the questions I get is one, the why
Yeah.
going in there. I mean,
Yeah.
people are not excited that I've talked to.
Yeah.
Well, I talked to one person who was excited,
Oh,
but the vast majority don't want the why for a couple of reasons. And the other thing is, we now have 2 amphitheaters and we're gonna have 2 marinas. Now, the other marina is not even full yet.
right.
And we're building a second marina. And so the question is, why?
Yep, so, the marina is conceptual, and by all indication, it's something that would make for a hotel amenity. And honestly, that's why I paid a premium to where I am, so that I could have a boat, nearby. Just like I purchased my house on Locust Street so that I could go down to the Cambridge Marina. If you look at Oxford and you look at how many boat slips they have, it's sort of like the boat slips aren't the problem. The problem is the people wanting to live and utilize the boat slips. So to me, the things that we're doing to address the structural issues with the taxes for people that maybe are mindful of that. Something we don't have control over is the school system, the health hospital system moving north and east, the perceived lack of investment in the areas or in and around the marina. Anyone's free to disagree with me, but I would say that from when I lived in the West End, if I felt like I was being supported by the city government and that services were superior and that my taxes were going to things that actually kept my neighbor's house from falling down next to me, and I didn't have a group home going in 2 ways, unregulated. There's no problem with a home like that. It's just completely unregulated. Absentee ownership of properties, all those things are the marina's problems, in my opinion, short of the fact that the boat slips are too big on the end and the wave action. Those are structural issues that have nothing to do with that stuff. But yeah, I honestly would argue that the reason I left Locust Street was the cars were speeding down the street. My neighbors, I didn't feel like my investment was something that I should continue to put money in. And I think that boat slips are a reason that probably a lot of people in this room are why they're here in the first place. So it's sort of like, I read an article a while back about Nashville, which is a city that's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And they had a terrible problem. They had so many restaurants cropping up in their commercial core that they had to start paying health insurance to their waiters and waitresses to keep them. And downtown, I heard it a million times, and most of the people that own those restaurants are my good friends, and we grew up together and whatever. The fear of having too many restaurants in a downtown area has been disproven so many times. The more you have, the more critical mass you have, and the more reason people have to come down there in the first place. So it's sort of like people have their opinions about this, but I don't think you can have too many boat slips. I honestly don't. I think you need to focus on the reasons why people would want to keep a boat there in the first place. It's not about the boat slips.
My question is, you're building a hotel, when you're having boat slips that people come in on their boats, aren't they gonna stay in their boats and not patronize the hotel?
So that's an excellent point, and I don't know, but I happen to trust the decision of whoever would fund that marina and be on the hook for it, to fill it. And I'm assuming that, I'm sure the hotel would be a partner in that or whatever, I don't know. But again, a lot of these are business decisions and risks that the city's not going to take. But one thing the city does need to do is, if we want to fill our marina, we need to invest in our neighborhoods near our marina, and we need to make them desirable. We need to make Cambridge a desirable place for people to want to be and keep their boat.
But if you're not filling one marina, how are you gonna fill another?
The restaurants say they will come.
I'll say it one more time.
What?
It's not,
Restaurants
you have
here,
to
they
actually
will
make it a place people wanna come to in the first place to bring their boat with them. Does that make sense?
So
I just want to assure you that the marina is full. I had to wait in line to get my slip.
Well, there's your answer, Chuck, it's full, so that's wonderful. And right, and I think the problem the city's focused on, and there is a Department DNR grant, that, for all of my knowledge, did not pay for that fence they want in front of the lighthouse. But to actually resize and to convert some of those, piers to floating, because that's another stormwater problem. If we were to invest in a marina right now, it might be too low if we don't have it so that it floats. So I think they're putting floating piers in. You can resize a floating pier, that whole area out there. And then there's some baffling that's going to be done, from what I understand, to prevent the wave action, which it is different since the old marina. But part of that's, I think, environmental reasons, where you want fresh water to flow through your marina so the water's not stagnant and killing everything in it. Yes, sir.
For those who don't have a boat, one of the great assets of this community is that fishing pier, which is closed.
Yes.
It's also a significant source of food for being part of our community. What's being done about that?
Well, I had asked to be, I hadn't been invited to any of those meetings. I had been asked to attend one now that I was, and the mayor had been in some of them, so knew more about it than me. But we were fortunate to have a meeting not too long ago. And CWDI was there because they see something like that as a potential amenity. But one, DNR owns the pier, and they also own the property near the pier. It seems, it's fairly clear that the community over there likes not having all the traffic and things like that. So one of the ideas from DNR was, well, can we put it on the other side? But anyway, the most interesting thing from that.
How would you build a house there, you know?
Well, no. Right, so this is my point, is all of that is almost a moot point, because the lead engineer for the project basically told the group, well, if you had the money, all the design had been done, the studies, the permitting, which will take years, and this bridge was removed, which it's not, it would be 5 to 6 years before you'd even have a pier. And oh, by the way, we only have the money, we think, to remove the top of it. We don't have any engineering studies done. We don't know, we don't have anybody that's like, any of that stuff has even been started. And I think everyone on the call was sort of like, what's the good news? I mean, it was like, I couldn't believe the answer that we were hearing. So I'm not sure where that's going, but that call was essentially left like, guys, we're gonna take the top of this bridge off because we're worried it's gonna fall on a boater that's underneath of it. Didn't talk about the big picture as much, and was really like, we've already think we know what we're gonna do with the rubble. And I'm like, well, that really is not, I mean, the community, it was interesting to me. And he said, oh, by the way, it's gonna be, in today's dollars, if we did this, what we wanted to do, which is a 1,500-foot pier right now, minimum 18 feet wide, which should be able to handle an ambulance or a full-size vehicle, which we're also like, why? It's a fishing pier. They don't drive an ambulance on Ocean City's pier. I mean, there was very obvious questions. And again, this is an engineer, and I'm an engineer, so I know we can overthink problems sometimes, but this conversation was just like, towards the end, one of the attendees was like, why couldn't we just do like a floating pier, go out a few hundred feet, and call it a day? And it was like we were talking crazy talk. What do you mean? We can't actually drive a truck out there. But
Is the city council on top of this?
the city council doesn't have a whole lot of purview over it. Because
But
again,
you could make a lot of noise. And it certainly is significant to the people who live here.
yeah, I think it would be nice if the city council got more involved proactively on the waterfront. in that way, yeah. But I'm with you, this is like fresh off the press, like this is honestly last week that this even happened, to the point where I didn't know what to say when we go around at the end of the meeting, other than, oh, hey, by the way, I don't have a whole lot to report, but I did get one update about the fishing pier. Even if it was ready to go tomorrow, it would be 6 years before it was done. So it's, and I think it might also be the structural deficit of the state answer right now. I don't know. Yes, sir.
Brian, you talked about CWDI, everything going smoothly and positively and all that. There's not been a single dollar of private investment, and this has been over 5 years. And now they're seeking $50 million in public subsidies to build the infrastructure before we have any private people saying where they want to build, what they want to build. So how can you be so sure about going forward with a plan like that?
So I don't want to get ahead of my skis, and I'll defer the question to Matt if I do. But to me, there's not going to be any, the challenge with a site like that is you want to make it appealing. Just like you want to make the marina appealing to keep a boat in, you have to want to have people buy a house in Cambridge. The value in that site is public infrastructure, meaning the waterfront park, the walkway, streets and things that are actually going to make it interesting for a developer, because from what I understand, master developers came in, the only way they could even make it work is like a Beazer style thing where they put up condos right at the water and they abandon the back of the property. So,
Well, that's what CWDI has said, but we don't know that that's the case. You haven't talked to a major developer, have you?
no, but I actually, it was very clear to me that there was solicitations for master developers, and some of them that have, like, even I think there was, I don't know if it's confidential or not, but some people that have done the shopping center developments, people that are interested in the Hyatt, all of that, and the challenge of the property and the why it's requiring subsidy is because of the public amenity and the component that a developer just doesn't want to pay for. So, and I happen to read a lot about this. I'm not an expert, but you actually, just like I said, you have to make that site, you have to start putting features there to make it an interesting place for people to live. You know, if as is that area was interesting, you wouldn't be able to buy a house 2 blocks over for $50,000. I mean, that's been neglected for years and years and years. I mean, you've got to prime that pump. You've got to put some infrastructure in. You've got to invest in the park and the walkway and the street grid and things like that make it on par with make it an interesting development. Because the developer's got to pay for that, if not, and if they're going to have to pay for it, how are they going to pay for it? I mean,
They do it every time. There are developments all over Washington
and
Harbor, National Harbor.
and the way that they did it in National Harbor is they have a TIF, and that TIF was very successful, and that's how it happened. And I happen to know that some of the consultants on this project participated in National Harbor, and they know what they're doing. And the best thing that I heard in the discussions I was in was that they see this as a community first development. We're going to build this the way the community wants to do it, which makes zero financial sense from the start for a master developer, but it will if we can actually put the things in that make this an appealing site. You know, everything from connecting it to the downtown so that people can walk safely, which is something near and dear to me. Actually putting in, again, a walkway, which is not a small feat. Putting in as much as they can to take that load off the developer so that we can do things like this council has made very clear that they want, which is affordability. You know, the city didn't ask for $1 million condos. They don't want condos that are not accessible to certain incomes within the city. So if you're gonna do that, it's the subsidy for the other piece can't come from the development itself. And so that answers your question, because we've got a sort of philosophical, it's not philosophical, it's very, very factual, that you're either going to make it a great development by putting the things in with public money that entice development that is accessible, or you're gonna make an inaccessible development that is gonna pay its own way. So
What is the tip?
okay. That's
You said
yep, I'm sorry to assume that, so at its base level, the beauty of it, one, is that it is a promise of an increase in tax revenue because of development happening in the site. So right now, the base value of that property is X. If it becomes 10% more, that increments the taxes that the city and the county and the state collects on the site. The TIF allows you to take that additional tax money, not the base level, and put it towards infrastructure. So water, sewer, roads, street lights, any of those things that really aren't direct benefits, but are things that are needed for the site.
So this project does not have a tip, but Washington would.
So that's one of the things that this council said is the TIF is unrealistic, it's not ready, and Mr. Brady did a wonderful reporting job on it. But it's really hard to figure out. Now, Washington DC, it may have been less hard because, but there's a group of consultants called Municat that CWD has hired, that they do this for a living. And what they do is they figure out what everything's worth, what it could conceivably be worth, and then there's another arm of bond investors, which would be a group most likely called Medco, which is almost like it's a quasi-government type thing, but they would actually lend the money on the promise that the tax revenues would increase and could be used for infrastructure. The only cost to the city or county is foregoing the portion of the increase in taxes that goes towards the additional tax for infrastructure. If it doesn't happen, the city and county aren't on the hook for it. The property, which this won't happen because the bondholders would lose all their money. So it's a very conservative prediction. They would foreclose and own the property. But these experts do this in such a way, and it's so conservative that they build buffers in, they build financial like runways, all of that, and it's over a long period of time so that it works, because they want to get paid back because they're putting a lot of money out there for infrastructure. So it's, in its simplest form, it's an increase in tax revenue, a portion of which goes towards infrastructure, but you can get the money up front with the promise that you're gonna get it paid back over a period of time.
But we're not doing that.
No, we will. But the difficult part is, just like Mr. Brady mentioned, is you have a development that is incredibly unique, and actually unique in some of the best ways. And I think that a lot of the really smart minds are involved in this project is because it is so unique to have such a wonderfully publicly centered development for the community, just like they want it to be, which they've said in all these different studies. It's hard to pay for, but they're trying to make it work because they know it's community first. So what has to happen, and this is something that our council has said, well, this TIF's not ready, the TIF's not ready. What has to happen is at some point, the council and the city council and the county council have to say, okay, this is the date and this is the value of the property. This is starting date. And that's something that we will have to agree on and vote on. And at that point, then they can get moving, because the assumption is that Municat, Medco, Network Really Park, everyone that's involved in these projects, all the attorneys and the potential investors, and probably a lot of developers hanging on the side that aren't coming forward yet because they're going to wait and see how this thing goes. They're not fools with their money, I hope. I hope they're smart investors and they're going to see that we're actually going to move this thing forward. that's when things start rolling. But the challenge for us is we have a council, right now it's saying, the TIF's not ready, the TIF's not ready. Well, maybe it's not, but it's gonna be at some point. The other thing that they're dealing with is, does anyone know what the housing market's gonna do in the next month? Does anyone know what interest rates are gonna do in the next month? Does anyone know what the future of Cambridge is in the next 6 months after all these years living here? I mean, it is an incredibly complicated thing to do. They will do it very conservatively, which very conservatively. So despite what the rumor is, these guys set these things up so that they get paid back because they're giving us the money for the infrastructure. It is not taxpayer money. It's a promise of future taxpayer money. So
Does the city have anybody working for you guys? You have an expert?
I have actually suggested, and we have talked about it, that if we disagree, and by we means a majority vote of the council, that the TIF is not reasonable, that there should be a way to either vet or entrust with someone that does TIF analysis to come up with something that competes. But, you know, the irony is that CWDI is actually part city, part county, part state. And the brilliance of it is that's what it is. So we shouldn't be out doing anything but supporting that analysis and listening to the experts and actually working with them to find out what's going on. And that's what our board representatives are on there and are saying things, but it's not that simple. But to your point, it would be nice,
Well,
but
I
it's an
mean,
incredibly
I
difficult
know
thing
the
to do.
board representatives and they're wonderful people. They're Super people. Okay, but they don't have a background in tips.
No, you don't need to. You just need to trust Municap, who's been
No,
hired
you
to
need
develop
to
it.
have your own independent
Okay.
source.
Yeah.
To
Well,
me,
I would,
an issue,
I fully support that.
an issue of 20 to 30 years
Yep.
of the city not getting taxes.
Yep. No. They get taxes. They get base taxes and they get a percentage of what's left over after the infrastructure, which we might have to pay for otherwise. However, to your point, and I agree with you, I remember sending specific suggestions to our city manager that we really should, if you're gonna say this doesn't work, we need to prove it. And or at least have someone at the table that can work with what the other analysis is saying. Absolutely, it'd be foolish not to, and that has not happened. And I don't know why, I cannot answer that question.
I have if the goal is to create tax revenue, how does moving the Y there make any sense? It would seem that's negative, but it also leaves this other huge tax-free property sitting there unused. I mean,
So,
can you
so.
provide some rationale for that?
Yeah, well, so I know, I've heard all of the things and I can't take a position on this because it is so contentious. It's almost like, let's just worry about actually moving this project forward without something that really I felt like was premature that happened on these meetings. But it's good that it came out because it is a very important thing for the community. So I'm gonna give you, not taking sides, but telling you the rationale. So the idea of attracting people and making them want to live at a site is one, the YMCA is something that would conceivably do that. So you essentially, the tax value of the property itself and the YMCA itself is probably less than what it would, well, it is less because they're not taxing it, but the value of the property is more by having them there because they would bring people into the site regularly. The other thing that they would do is the community has made it loud and clear that they want to feel welcome at this site, no matter what happens. And certain development proposals and something that is inevitable is that the not in my backyard, once housing gets there, people are gonna be trying to close off access to the beach. They're gonna be trying to close off access to their yards. They're gonna be building fences everywhere. So if not the why, so let's just move them out of there. Having a facility like the Y, which provides scholarships for attendance, is health-centered, would want to utilize that beach with regular day-to-day activities, would be a welcome mat, extending that welcome mat to that piece of property, I think is almost imperative, because if not the Y, something like that is
But you
of
get
real
reverse
value.
that from the other site that's in play too. And you'll suddenly have a huge property that's.
So, right, and
abandoned
that's, so to your
and
point.
Generating no tax revenue.
Yep, so to your point, that is absolutely the tantamount concern that we have a legacy in Cambridge of sort of like what Chris Rock used to say, every community's got the old mall and the new mall. And they always say they're gonna make the old mall this blah, 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 and somebody buys it and it ends up being, not something that anybody wants to be in. I think they've knocked us all.
That's a good one.
But he's brilliant. But yeah. So what? First off, the YMCA actually, in order to build a new Y, they have to attract investment. They have to have people that are willing to donate money for them to renovate or build that. They are not. That's what they have to do. So they have to sort of put a proposal out there, no matter where they went, where people are willing to write a check, because they don't take debt on. And I learned this by actually going on a tour to see what this new facility they promised would be all about, just educate myself. And they do that because they want to be able to provide scholarships. They want all of their memberships going towards the members and the amenities and the upkeep of the facilities, because debt equals an encumbrance that we were warned thousands of years ago that ties your hands to do what you really want to do. You're not in control of your own destiny if that's the case.
I want to see the plan for the property they're abandoned.
So to your point, to answer that, again, let's not talk about the why, let's just first think about that property, if not the why, what. There can be value added by having a community-based organization there, because private development there may make it more difficult there. The kids are playing at the playground, it's annoying. So what CWDI did was they actually immediately, and honestly, the interesting thing about the executive director of CWDI lives a block away from the Y, so I don't think he wants there to be a vacuous pit left in his neighborhood. They had their designer design conceptually what could actually go on that property and make it a new urbanist type development, which the guy that did the developing, I knew about, and he has not designed a community that has not, the biggest problem with the communities that he's designed is they become unaffordable because they're so popular. So they have a world-class designer that basically donated a SketchUp of what could go where the Y is. And if built, and if the city got behind it and made it happen, again, I'm not advocating for it, I'm just saying that that's the answer, and there would have to be a real conscious effort to ensure that a very expensive building to demolish was not left there, and that if the Y went anywhere, because that's what they needed to do to get renovated and get their donors to give them money, that something went there that was world-class and actually made that neighborhood.
To build houses.
Or, well, what he conceptualized was traditional fabric, alleys, just like Somerset has alleys, a pocket park, front porches, built up to the street, all, small front yards, larger cottage backyards, et cetera, et cetera. So we have some questions here.
I just wanted to say real quick, as someone who's worked in nonprofit my whole life, if you don't want the Y to move and you don't want the Y there, that energy would be more beneficial directed at the YMCA board members and the YMCA funders. If you actually don't want the Y, go to the YMCA board members, write the YMCA board members, write their funders. It's all public information on their 990 off GuideStar. That's where the power is in that. The city council's kind of done what they can in limitations through planning and zoning. But I will tell you, I worked in a zoo where we had issues. You want
Yeah.
It's the people that control it on the
I
board.
think, let's make it clear, it's not the problem, the problem is not the Y. The problem is they don't pay any taxes, and they will be abandoning a property that the rest of us are stuck with.
And that
If
it's
they can
not
address
zoned
those
for
two problems, I
housing.
think the library would be perfect on that level. We don't need another empty school, basically.
You want to talk a little bit about the land bank and what you think that could do to like move unproductive properties
Yeah.
back into
So-
productive in our community?
So this council, when we were elected, what we were all elected on, believe it or not, was actually the deplorable condition of housing in this community and the legacy of terrible housing, just sort of a decline, a general decline of our housing stock and living conditions. Two challenges with housing. One is sort of, we have code enforcement, our standards are incredibly hard to enforce, we don't have enough people, blah, 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 and then we don't seem to be attracting investment at any scale in our core neighborhoods. Now, it's a very complicated reason for that. There's a lot of historical reasons for that. There's a lot of legislative, there's a lot of zoning reasons for that. There's a lot of, we could go on. There's books written about this. However, to back of the napkin, how to make development more appealing is why are homes built on the edge of the city? Because it's greenfield, it's cheaper, it's easier, it's not as much as it used to be because there's a lot of the state's trying to do something to prevent that. But everything's new and you don't have individual neighbors that are complaining. You buy a field, you plot it out, you get someone to design it, you build it. Banks actually love financing that because it's predictable. Insurance companies love insuring those homes, et cetera, et cetera. Well, a land bank is an attempt to essentially have a quasi-governmental organization assemble properties for two reasons. One, if you can assemble blocks of properties, you can mimic that sort of at scale redevelopment opportunity. The other thing you can do is you can actually put conditions around it. So to your point about if the Y were to leave, if their funders were to decide, which to her point, if the community doesn't get behind this, the Y is going to stay where it is, but it may have the problem of the funders actually don't want to keep funding it where it is, which would be a real problem for the community. But anyway, if the Y were to move, you would want to make sure that the city embraced that and made it so that you can do things in the land bank. If you're controlling the property, you can do things like pre-approved housing plans. You can actually, the infrastructure is already in existence. You can actually put land leases in place, or you can actually have developers come in and build a property and subsidize the value of the property and put conditions around the sale so that somebody, whoever buys it, has to hold it for X amount of time or they don't get the gain of the house. So there's all kinds of conditions by you owning it. And then the simplest answer is if the city goes to buy or sell property, there's like a several month process for even something that's an abandoned ditch next to a church, which is what a lot of what comes in front of council. But a land bank not having those specific restrictions can buy and sell property and acquire properties and has some more flexibility, which the governance of it, that's something I'm concerned. I want to make sure that there's strong governance around it, but just really has to be more flexible, but also the real power of the land bank was that the state had to enable this legislation because city governments can't just do this. It has to be at the state level. So the land bank is the single most important tool that we're going to have on if housing is falling into disrepair. Instead of just selling it to the next lowest bidder, the city can actually almost act like a community development organization, put the conditions around it, make sure that it's returned to the condition that we want, that the community wants, that the neighborhood wants, so that it's just not falling into this gradual decline. We can actually start to move the ball upwards.
And you're looking
and
for
that's the
numbers right now, seven?
I didn't know, we haven't actually fully like the bylaws and all that kind of stuff aren't written yet. And my impression was once the framework's in place and they know, once that's all put into, then, but yeah, for now, anyone that would be interested is certainly.
Right, so there's 5 members, 1 from each ward,
Mhm.
and then 2 at-large members.
I
So if
think so.
anybody's interested, talk
Yeah.
to Brian.
Well, yes, send to our city management office who's assembling all of that stuff. But yes, does that answer your question? I mean, and it's just a tool that the city will have that they've never had to, instead of just let the downward spiral happen, we can actually start to put properties back on a productive path.
And whose expense would that be at?
So, for as terrible as COVID was, we were able to seed the land bank with, I believe it's $1 million to start. And then the idea of that is that the land bank would fund itself. That you would actually, essentially you're becoming a property developer. So you're purchasing things at a low cost and selling them at a slightly higher cost. Yeah, roll your eyes, I'm with you.
I am.
No, I know, that's why, that's why it's so important that the governance of it and that the individuals involved are qualified to make decisions, and that there's a check and balance on the system. And we'll be the first in the state, but the thing is, they are actually, the reason the state is even willing to do it is it is a tried and true method. And just like, if not the why at that parcel next to the visitor center, what? If not the land bank, what? Are we just gonna keep doing what we've been doing? And that is clearly not the solution. So this is one more tool to sort of try to reverse what's been a legacy of failed housing in the city. There's 2 questions. Amy?
So, I can't believe it hasn't come up before now, but what's happening with Water Street, second S turn of Hambrook's with the amount of sewage spills we're having? And now, I've lived in my neighborhood for 34 years, now we have lime all over the place.
Oh, was that to kill the?
Yes.
Mhm.
So, and the thing is, it's upsetting to me is, it's okay for the people that live in that area to let them in, but we're having vehicular traffic just going through those areas.
Yeah.
When there's the sewage
Yeah,
spills
yeah.
and spilling
Yeah.
even more
Yeah.
sewage up the street.
Yeah.
So the city, I mean, I know we put barricades up,
So the construction is supposed to start in March,
for what?
to start rectifying the overflows.
Let's start on.
The worst
water
areas
sewers.
first.
This is, I guess.
It's probably a reason it's called water.
But it's very soon, and the timing is such that they don't wanna disrupt the Ironman path, but the priority, even above that, is to get this reconciled immediately. And it hasn't helped that, to my knowledge, I'm not sure whether we weren't paying attention, but Leonard's Lane even backed up and had a sewer overflow. So that's the top of the hill. I knew when I got in there, just having lived on Water Street, that this was a huge problem. And I just couldn't be happier to have been the council that committed to finally fixing it, and putting the resources towards it, because it was the sort of surprise. This is actually should be the biggest priority for the city. And again,
More so
like
than
anything else.
Marinas and stuff.
So I will tell you a really positive development that I learned at our last council meeting is that the Maryland Department of Environment, which I'm sure Judd is very familiar with them, they like to fine us for these things, which honestly, I thought that was okay. I was happy to put on my Facebook page every time we had an overflow, because to me, just poking the bear is so important with stuff like this, to let people know that this is happening. They actually have indicated now that they have an ability to, whereas they also could promote funding for us to actually fix the problem instead of just needling us to death. If we commit to actually fixing it, which it's easy for us to do because we've already done it, and they've caught wind of this, they can put us in essentially a position of preferred, funding now so that we do have, we've paid for it. We increased the sewer rates, we've got, we've done the matches, we're doing this. But we're now being looked at in a different light from NDE of like, oh, they're actually working on it. We don't have to needle them like, you guys need to do something. Now it's, okay, you're in a different queue, you're actually working on this, and we're now gonna be more of a partner with you. And I was like, I can't believe this is amazing, because this is what we need. We need a partner to help us, because Cambridge is a poor city. They weren't, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you would think that would have registered for us for a long time, but it's really, it's like it had to get this bad for finally people to be willing to say, hey, it was seen as a ward problem. It was seen as a Water Street problem. It was seen, that's all I can figure, when in fact, it's a citywide problem, because interesting thing is all those pipes are connected.
Well, actually, that's interesting, because some of them aren't. When our street collapsed apparently about 65 years ago,
Yeah,
and they put in a whole new sewer, when it started backing up in our basement recently, we had to dig all the way across the street and
Yeah.
discovered we had never been hooked on. My suspicion is that we're probably not the only house in Cambridge that was not.
no, well, that's a
That
that's
may
a
be
scary
part of
thing
the problem. All the
that we've been told is that, it's sort of like, when you unclog one pipe, the other one gets more in. And we're really, we don't know what's gonna happen. A lot of Cambridge being a beautiful old historic city, got a lot of beautiful old historic stuff underground. And, even major cities, when they have water main breaks and sinkholes and all that, they're probably a lot of times like, oh, didn't I know it was in that kind of shape? You just, fortunately, one of the things that we approved is an investment in a device, which this is how technology solves some of our problems. And I'm a big proponent of this, is we will have a thing that you can actually, instead of a human being actually having to climb in and look around, we are gonna have in-house the ability to examine these pipes.
That's how we found out.
When we have problems, we'll have some of that capability, which will save a ton of man hours, will prevent streets from having to be dug up a lot of times to find the issue. And it'll be very valuable, because like you said, it's like, oh, well, they just put in a brand new pipe that apparently goes to my basement. We gotta, work smarter, not harder, right?
What is the fix for Water Street? What's the fix? What are they gonna do on Water Street to make it better?
They allocated $16 million.
To do what though?
They got the new pipe. Put in-
New piping?
There's two problems. Part of the problem is seawater fills into the pipes because of cracks, leaks, disjointed, whatever, old stuff. There's water coming in to our sewer system, which is supposed to be completely separate. Our rainwater storage, it's not. Clearly a lot of water is getting into that because when it rains real heavy. So what they're doing is they're attacking the areas that they're confident a lot of this is happening first, to start to minimize the excess amount of water. The reason that the manhole covers are blowing off is more water is getting in there than the system can pump over to the station over there. It goes from its gravity to somewhere, and then it goes to where Beezer is, and then it gets pumped over to the place, the sewer plant over on Crusader.
Wastewater.
Yep. So the idea is these repairs are to prevent excess water from getting into the sewer system, and that's a lot of what's happening because the sewer system by itself can handle the capacity. It's when rainwater gets into it or tidal flows get into it that it overflows. So we got to keep that out, and that's really what they're attempting to attack. And then there's also some money that we've allocated to make sure that the pumps are working over at Trenton Street, which I think that was last built in 1920. It's been maintained, but hopefully the capacity can be increased there. And if it's gonna fill in, you can get it out of there quicker, you know, sort of like bail the buckets quicker. So yeah, it's basically too much going into something and not going out fast enough, or preventing it from getting in there in the first place, which is the real solution, because, you know.
But how are you gonna prevent the tide coming in? I mean, what can you do to
That's
prevent
the,
the
that's the
tide?
berm. Anyway,
Everybody getting a rain barrel.
we've gotten Brian for almost an hour here. Does anybody want any questions on stoplights, trails, or?
So there might have been another question. Was there any about this?
I just wanted to clarify, because the city doesn't own the property that the Y currently sits on. That was deeded to the Y, is that correct?
I'm honestly, yeah.
I think that's
As
true.
far as I know, it was owned by the county, I think,
The
because it
county
was a
deeded
school
it to
and
the
they
Y.
deeded it to the Y.
But they deeded it in perpetuity. They did not deed it in such a way as they should have, where it would have reverted back to the county. So
Yeah.
it is the
Yeah.
Y's property, lock, stock, all of it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that, because if the Y decides to move, then they're going to sell that property. You know, and then would they make that investment then into the waterfront for their new facility, using the money from the sale of the property there?
So we get an Amazon warehouse.
They wouldn't be beholden to do that. And then if they're 501c3 and that affects their tax base to the city, would that also affect the tax base if we're not collecting taxes on them at the waterfront? Then you'd have to take that square footage out of
Right,
out
and,
of your
right,
future
and,
financial calculation.
yes, and again, you would not collect tax on that property, but the community has to determine whether there is inherent value to the property having that there, or where it currently exists more. And more importantly, to her point, the funders, because I can tell you, it's a community-based organization, and a lot of the people that have invested so much time, effort, money, and energy in the current Y are not convinced. And they have close relationships with a lot of board members. So it is a complicated subject. It is far more complicated than, is it going to pay for itself? It really has to be a groundswell of support for, this is what's going to happen. And everyone is going to compromise and realize what is the best scenario moving forward with all of those hairy details worked out. So it should not muddle, though, the fact that a lot of good can happen on, and should happen, and is happening on that property, not fast enough. That we need to support, and we need to support CWDI in making that happen, because that trail along there, the green space, the expansion of our working waterfront, and just getting whatever we have to do to get those 4 parcels ready for development, we really need to be behind, in a responsible way with the
Yeah,
team.
but the feedback is nobody wants it over there. So, to say, well, we need to get behind it.
No. I was saying, so let me divide the Y. I did not say that with the Y. We didn't need to, I said, we need to get behind the efforts to get the waterfront ready for commercial
The
development.
block that the Y is taking is the best block in the blocks, in the place, okay? It's the quickest one off the highway. It's the one you see first. That's the premier lot. And nobody understands why it's going to the Y.
Again,
And why could be back on Maryland Avenue? You have less, so it's up front. But any other questions for Brian in any other area?
Oh, yeah. I've spent an hour here for this. Yes, he knows why I'm here. I got a copy of the downtown traffic study.
Right.
And I've read it, and I want to know, what was the cost for the study? What was the cost for this study?
$10,000.
Only $10,000, okay.
And it was money that was budgeted out of ARPA because.
City paid that.
So the way it works is, during COVID, there is more pedestrian deaths nationwide than there's ever been. And one of the
Was it here?
There, we had to find out. And the potential risk for in our underserved communities for a problem, and the potential damage to our downtowns during COVID allowed us to fund a study using ARPA money to determine if we could actually make our streets safer before we have a problem.
What has it cost so far to implement this program, which is only maybe a third way done with the stop signs and the painting on the streets and all? How much does that cost?
I think the sum total, they decided to use contracts. I think it's the whole project, everything is like 70,000.
Is there a time frame for the pilot program? I know this is supposed to be a pilot program. Is there a time frame for that before you will make a final decision as to if you implement it or not?
So I guess normally what you do, and this is in the MUTCD, the reason that there are blinking red lights and the no turn on red signs haven't been removed, other than the city does not have a working bucket truck, is because the standard way to convert to an all-way stop, federal, state to local, is you leave the red lights blinking for 30 days. Now, don't hold me to that, because it would mean that the city, a lot of the work was done in-house. We have
Yeah, it took 8 men or so.
Well, commentary on the efficiency of public works is a separate discussion. But one of the real benefits is that they were out in the community. People saw that something was actually being done.
Or did they do that or him? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
no.
Who initiated this idea?
Well, so there's actually a number of research papers out there, and it's a nationwide movement. It first started globally,
But locally.
called Vision Zero. No, that's how it was initiated. So we actually have done, we got a grant through the state. The state has a Vision Zero policy. SHA, they have a study we did called the Bikeways Study. And our comprehensive plan, first and foremost, mandated, which we patently ignored, the fact that our downtown intersections are not pedestrian friendly, which is not good for business. They are not safe for mobility impaired individuals. And the whole movement for things like diversity, equity, inclusion, which is a big thing nationally. We really need to make our streets safer, because talking about tips, one of the best ways to determine where your tax revenues are generated and how to increase them is actually to make your streets safer. I read an article just the other day. There was a guy that was saying, well, I wanted to be an architect, and I wanted to be an urban planner, and I found out that I'm actually would most likely to be a traffic engineer, because we have, in the last 50 years, turned all of our arteries in our cities into the equivalent of highways. They're impossible to cross. We don't have kids feeling safe. We don't have people moving into our cities. Our kids don't walk to school anymore, and all we can do is complain about the fact that we can't get home to Walmart fast enough. And we want to save 30 seconds instead of allowing somebody in a wheelchair to cross in front of our house. So that's all I can say. The research is so far and ahead of any sort of discussion about whether this costs $10,000 or not. But I can tell you
70 plus 10.
right, and what would be really nice is if we took Academy Street, which was federal money when it was widened into 4 lanes, which paving a street now costs about $1 million a mile. So right there, we've got 5 lanes of blacktop on Academy Street that people see as a runway, not the part that's by Cedar Street, but the part in front of City Hall, that the city and taxpayer money has to go to pave every 10 years. It's completely wasted space. Stormwater runoff, not just the cost of blacktop. And the fact is, unless you design a road where people feel comfortable and pay attention. Distracted driving is one of the biggest problems we have as well, and you have to put visual indicators, you have to put predictability into roads now. This is not Ryan Roach, this is actually the best research in the world about what we need to do to our cities to make them more livable
But you're
places.
still gonna have blacktop costs. You can't do away
You
with
are,
that.
you are
This
absolutely.
study says that the traffic signals were 64 seconds. Traffic signals were 64 seconds. Now, if you don't have 64 seconds to sit there to wait for that light to turn green, then you shouldn't be driving. And you're right in here, right in your study, the summary of findings and recommendations, all of the signalized intersections which were selected for study are operating at acceptable levels of service with minimal delay.
Right.
Your very first line in your study says that. So if it's not broke, why are you doing? I go through those intersections 8 times a day,
Oh, wow.
8 times a day.
How often do you walk through them?
I do walk through it, but I do walk downtown. I walk downtown. I walk to the post office. I walk to the bank. I can't tell you how many times I've almost been hit at that intersection as a pedestrian.
Same here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and that's the majority. This is the
Yeah, the
majority.
question for
So I just wanted to, I am frankly thrilled
I know
with
you
the
are.
changes, because I walk my dog twice a day, and I walk to restaurants once or twice a week, plus the post office, plus the bank. I walk downtown all of the time. And there were at least 2 intersections, one right in front of city council, and the other one by Italian, where there's a corner on both of those, which now has been fixed in front of city council because of the change in the lights, where it was never safe to cross as a pedestrian with the way the lights were, because it was always right, there was always a right of way to turn right, which means as a
It's called slip
pedestrian,
lane, so,
you were
yeah.
stuck and you just kind of had to like look and run.
How many people do you
And
think cross there to go to district court? I see it all the
All,
time.
yes, but it
All
was
the time,
never
with no
safe.
problem.
But it was never safe. There's no crosswalk there.
The safety problem is this right to turn right on red. That's
Absolutely.
exactly the source of the problem.
That's a
And
big
then
one.
to the extent the stop signs fix it, that's good. But the real problem in pedestrian safety, I think around the whole country, is this right turn on red, because most people don't stop.
They're not
No,
stopping now.
The problem with the 4-way stop is you're watching the cars and not pedestrians.
Okay.
So there's a kind of a problem.
Okay,
I don't know how to solve
we've
it.
taken, Brian's taking an hour here.
I could actually talk about this all day because history will be on the side of making our streets more livable. And our economy is dependent on it, and restoring the quality of life in our urban fabric is absolutely imperative that we do something about the ridiculous amount of speed and distracted driving that is going on in our neighborhoods. And the research and evidence is to the contrary, and you're trying to contradict a report from paid professionals that further into that report
They were
says
there
if you
12
convert them to
hours,
4-way
12
stops,
hours. That's all it said. They were there 12 hours.
if you convert them to all-way stops, they go from a B- to a B, and it improves. It keeps cars on the same level they were in, but it improves the pedestrian and multimodal and inability for people with dogs and wheelchairs and whatever to cross off the charts. They looked at that from a all-encompassing standpoint, not from the I'm behind my car and I just feel uncomfortable coming up to a 4-way stop. That's
That's
the
not my problem.
point.
I'm not uncomfortable. I do what I'm supposed to do, but 4 cars in front of me don't.
Are you doing anything
And the ones
about
coming.
Okay.
North Blue Ruin, the intersection of
So-
Blue Ruin?
so if you wanna know the
pedestrian
truth-
cannot see.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
light.
So that, the whole reason that this happened is because some of the biggest employers in this city, from a restaurant standpoint, are on those end corners. Sunnyside Shop has been there for I don't know how many years. You've got a woman-owned business, Vintage 414, that is screaming for cars to be slowed down in front of their place, trying to cross in front of Craig's. You've got people trying to cross into all of these areas, and I've seen a person get hit when someone is taking a left, because there was never a point in that intersection, and there still isn't, when a car has to pay attention And the whole reason that I was excited about this study wasn't because of PA and Academy, which is wonderful because you can just save a little time getting home. It was because that intersection is ground zero for this city's local economy and people that are risking their own capital to make restaurants work and to employ locals and to make nice places to eat that put money back in our economy. And the whole reason this study's being done, to tell you the truth, is for that intersection and a place that your son is actually employed.
Two sons.
Two sons, and they do.
So I'm in that
they-
area all
and
the
it's
time. And
brilliant,
there is a
and I am so
crosswalk
happy to
that
do
you can
something that
use.
is going to benefit the safety of people entering and exiting those businesses in that corner.
You can't see this. You can't
Okay.
see a stoplight with your pedestrian. You can't tell which street has. is
Brian
going
is,
which way.
Brian is more than happy to talk to you after the meeting.
Yeah.
But I'm sure this subject is not finished. But I really enjoyed you coming tonight and taking all the I'd like to tell everybody that CAN is a free organization, but we do accept donations. So if you would like to donate, we would appreciate that. And CAN went over 750 emails this past week. So we're going out to at least 750 households with information.
And can I say just a closing remark when you're done?
Sure.
I don't want to be known as the guy that like was willing to put in stop signs. And I honestly value your opinion, Barry, I really do. But the guy that I want to be known for is the guy that literally grew up in this town
I do
and is
too.
doing everything he can figure out to make it the town that it should be. The town that when people show up here and they say, this place is beautiful, how come this, how come that, how come this? And I literally obsess over the small, inexpensive things. And you may think $70,000 is a lot of money, but we wasted more
I
money
do, and
doing
I pay my real
something.
estate tax.
I do too, believe me. It is not for the value of certain things. The most important thing is there are a lot of little things like that. And I can tell you the vast majority of people are like so appreciative. The people that are walking their dogs, the people that are in wheelchairs, the people that struggle
And
crossing
people that
four
work
lanes of
every
traffic.
day.
My
I love
son who
Cambridge.
goes through that intersection 4 times a day in a stroller. But I don't want to be known as that guy. I want to be known as the guy that is looking for the environment. He's looking out for the river. He's looking out for the oysters. He's looking out for the people in the disadvantaged urban neighborhoods. The guy that is doing everything in his power to improve housing. And he's doing it in a way that's going to benefit everyone in this city, not to their detriment, but even just a little bit with every move he makes. And I don't want to be known as the stop sign guy, but it just so happens that street trees and stop signs have a lot to do with quality of life in a city and making neighborhoods and making it a place people want to live.
Well, Brian, I've lived here 69 years. I've lived in the city of Cambridge 69 years. I have a house in Maine. I just got back from New Orleans Friday night and they're fine. They're perfect. But I talk up this town more than anybody you know. I put it out there all the time. I love Cambridge. I could move away. I could move to Maine. I will not leave Dorchester County or the city of Cambridge because I love it here. And you all asked for public input. That's why I'm here tonight, to give my input.
Well, the true measure of success in a community is when you can move and you don't. So thank you.
Okay, so last item here is council is up for reelection this year, October 29th.
Is it this year?
Yes, October 29th this year. And so we're going to have elections, non-presidential elections, single election then. So the 29th. So keep that on your calendar. And we'll let you know who's going to run. You have to.
Wait, there's one more item. Brian, I wanted to talk about the street trees, if that's okay. Can I have 2 minutes? I came a long way to talk about.
Anybody that wants to talk about street trees, please.
So,
2 minutes, okay, I'm here.
hi. I'm Jennifer Vaccaro. I'm with Shore Rivers. And we have a grant from Chesapeake Bay Trust to plant 1,000 street trees in our watersheds in 5 towns. And Cambridge is one of those towns where we're focusing our efforts on planting street trees. And so I'm just trying to get the word out that if you want a tree in front of your house and you live in the city of Cambridge, we want to give you a tree for free and plant it for you. So if you're involved, obviously you're people who are involved. I have some flyers. Please spread the word to your neighborhoods, through your community organizations, through your house of worship. We want to work with anybody who wants to have a tree.
Do you plant them on, where I come from, we used to call it County Strip, but the area between the sidewalk and
We
the
will
curb?
plant them there, but we will also plant them on your private
Oh,
property.
really?
Yes. So it does not have to be in that strip.
We won't do that.
Yeah, and what about downtown?
It's absolutely. So I'm meeting with Brian tomorrow to talk about additional
But
funding.
the biggest
for
complaint is
some
that they tear up the sidewalks,
Yeah.
but there's a way to plant
There's a
a tree so
way
that it doesn't tear it up.
Gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah, gone.
And additionally, if you have power lines, we're happy to plant shorter growing trees so that they don't, the power company doesn't come and back through the trees. But yes, we are working on some additional infrastructure to help the trees mature without taking out the area. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Look at this.